My father demanded 80% of my salary for my sister. Then one paycheck exposed their shocking greed. My father told me 80% of your salary will be for your sister and the other 20% for me. It's that simple. So I laughed and said, I'll be taking 100% and leaving, and you two can pay your own bills. It's that simple. My name is Esteban. I'm 27 years old, and until recently I was living trapped in a suffocating routine. It wasn't just the exhaustion from working long hours at a job that barely paid enough to survive, but the weight of a family that, instead of supporting me, squeezed me dry as if I were a money machine. I grew up in a modest neighborhood, the kind where the houses have thin walls, and the neighbors know more about your life than you'd like. My mother, Marina, went to work in another country when I was 15. She was a nurse, and the opportunity to earn a better salary in Europe was something she couldn't pass up. She promised it would be temporary, that she would save enough to give us a better life and then return. But the years passed, and although she sent money from time to time, her visits became more and more sporadic. At first I missed her so much my chest ached, but over time I learned to live with that emptiness. My father, Gustavo, and my younger sister, Claudia, stayed with me, and without realizing it, I became the pillar of the household. At 18, right after finishing high school, I started working. There was no money for university and someone had to pay the bills. My first job was in a packaging factory, a noisy, hot place where I spent 8 hours a day sealing boxes for minimum wage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was what was available. Every payday I handed over almost my entire paycheck to my father. He said it was to maintain the house, the rent, electricity, water, food. I didn't question it because that's what was expected of me. I was the man of the house, right? The one who had to sacrifice. But there was something that never sat right with me. Claudia, my 23-year-old sister, didn't contribute a single cent. Nothing. Zero. She worked part-time at a clothing store, but everything she earned was spent on going out with her friends, buying brand-name clothes, or paying for club admissions. While I came home with sore feet and clothes smelling of sweat, she would walk in made up and smiling, telling stories of her nights out partying. If I asked her to help with anything, even just washing the dishes, she would roll her eyes and say, "Oh, Esteban, don't be a drag. That's what you're here for." And my father, sitting on the couch with a beer in his hand, would laugh and tell her, "Leave her be. She's young. She'll have time to worry later." My father, Gustavo, was another story altogether. Before my mother left, he worked as a mechanic, but after she started sending money, he quit. He'd say it wasn't worth killing himself working for peanuts when Marina could support us. But when my mother's money stopped arriving regularly, he never looked for work again. Instead, he became an expert at spending mine. Every time I came home, I'd find him in the yard with his friends, surrounded by empty beer bottles, laughing loudly while music blared. I once counted more than 20 bottles in a single night. Who paid for that? Me, my salary, my hours of work. I tried talking to him several times. "Dad, I need you to help with something. I can't cover everything." But he always responded the same way, with a mocking smile. "Esteban, you're young, you're strong. I've already done my share of work. Now it's my turn to enjoy life. And your sister, well, she's my princess. I'm not going to ask her to kill herself working like you do." Then he would laugh as if my life were a joke. Sometimes when I arrived exhausted and saw Claudia going out in a new dress or my father opening another beer, I felt a rage burning inside me. But I swallowed it, not because I wanted to, but because my mother, before she left, had asked something of me. "Esteban, take care of your father and your sister. Don't leave them alone. You're the man of the house now." And like an idiot, I took those words as if they were law. Every time I wanted to explode, I would remember her voice and tell myself, "They're my family. I have to endure it." The years passed, and my life was an endless repetition of work, bills, and humiliations. But something started to change when, after 3 years at the factory, I was promoted to shift supervisor. It wasn't a big deal, but the salary was a bit better, and it gave me the opportunity to learn more about the company. It turned out I had a natural talent for organization and problem solving. My bosses noticed, and the following year, they offered me a position in the office managing inventory. The salary doubled. Then, with time, I kept climbing. From inventory manager, I moved to logistics coordinator and then to operations manager. In 5 years, my salary was 7 times higher than what I started with. 7 times. It was more money than I ever imagined having, but I never told my father or Claudia. Why? Because I knew that if they found out, they would squeeze every last drop out of me. So I continued to hand over the same amount as always, the equivalent of my old minimum wage salary, and I put the rest into a savings account that no one knew about. My father thought I was still earning the same, and every payday he would ask for the money with the same arrogant attitude. "Come on, Esteban, give me the household money. Don't make me wait." I would nod, hand him the money, and stay silent. Meanwhile, my account grew, and with it, a small spark of hope. Maybe one day I could leave that house and live for myself. Despite my new salary, my life at home didn't change. I still slept in the same small room with a creaky bed and a fan that barely worked. Claudia, on the other hand, had the bigger room with a new TV that, of course, I had paid for. My father continued to spend on his drunken nights, and every time I came home I'd find him on the same couch with the same beer, surrounded by the same friends. "Esteban, get me another one from the fridge," he'd sometimes say without even looking at me. And I, like an idiot, would obey, but not everything was so simple. Even though I was saving money, I didn't dare to leave. The promise I made to my mother bound me like a chain. Every time I thought about leaving the house, her voice echoed in my head. "Don't leave them alone." And though I hated to admit it, I still held on to the hope that something would change, that my father would see me as more than a wallet, that Claudia would realize I deserved respect too. But that never happened. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a Friday, and my bi-weekly pay had just been deposited. As always, I printed the deposit slip for my records, but I made a fatal mistake. I left it on my desk in plain sight. Normally, I kept those papers in a folder hidden under my mattress, but that day, I was so tired that I forgot. When I got home from work, I found Claudia in my room with the slip in her hand, her eyes wide as saucers. "This is what they pay you," she said, almost shouting. Her voice was a mix of surprise and greed. "Esteban, you're earning a fortune and giving us crumbs. How dare you hide this from us?" I tried to stay calm. "Claudia, that money is mine. I earn it. You two don't contribute anything, and I still pay for everything in the house. What more do you want?" She laughed as if my response was absurd. "Yours? This is a family, Esteban. What you earn is for everyone. I'm going to talk to Dad." And she ran off with the slip still in her hand. I knew a storm was coming, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. That same night, my father called me into the dining room. He was sitting in his usual armchair with a beer in his hand, but this time he wasn't smiling. His face was red with rage. Claudia stood beside him with her arms crossed and a triumphant expression. "What's this about you earning so much and giving us the same as always?" my father said, waving the slip in the air. "Do you think you can fool me, Esteban? This is a family. We all help each other here. Why did you hide this from us?" I tried to explain. "Dad, that money is what I earn with my work. I've been paying the bills for this house since I was 18. Claudia contributes nothing. And you spend my money on beer and parties with your friends. Don't you think I deserve to keep something for myself?" My father laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. It was a cruel laugh, the kind that makes you feel small. "Deserve. Look, Esteban, let me explain how this works. Your sister wants to study at the most prestigious university in the country. That costs money, a lot of money. And me? Well, I have my expenses. So from now on, 80% of your salary will go to Claudia so she can fulfill her dreams. The other 20% is for me, for my things, and for going out with my friends. It's that simple." I stared at him, unable to believe what I had just heard. 80% for Claudia, 20% for him and me. What was left for me? I felt the rage I had stored up for years rising in my throat like a volcano. But instead of screaming, I laughed. I laughed loudly, hysterically, as if I had just heard the best joke in the world. My father and Claudia looked at me as if I were crazy. "What are you laughing at?" my father asked, clearly annoyed. I wiped a tear from my eye, still laughing. "I'm laughing because I'm fed up with supporting two parasites who claim to be my family. Fed up with your drunken nights, Dad. Fed up with your parties, Claudia. Fed up with being treated like I'm worthless. So you know what? I'm leaving. I'm leaving with 100% of my salary, and you two can pay your own bills. It's that simple." My father's face changed. The rage gave way to an expression of disbelief. "What did you say? You don't call the shots, Esteban. You have an obligation to this family. You always have and you always will." "No," I said with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "That's over." I went to my room, took out a suitcase, and started packing my things, my clothes, my documents, my laptop, everything that was mine. My father followed me, yelling that I wasn't going to leave, that I couldn't just leave them like this. He tried to block the door, but I was no longer the same Esteban who would bow his head. I pushed him aside and walked out of that house without looking back. I went to live in an apartment all by myself. I bought a flat-screen TV, a bed with a mattress that doesn't creak, and I even allowed myself the luxury of a trip to the beach. It's incredible how it feels to spend your own salary on yourself without anyone telling you that you don't deserve it. But it wasn't all peace. About 3 months later, my cell phone rang at 10 p.m. It was an unknown number, but something told me it wasn't just any call. I answered, and the voice on the other end made my blood run cold. It was Claudia, my sister, but she didn't sound like the usual Claudia with her arrogant tone and mocking laugh. She sounded desperate. "Esteban, please, you have to help us," she said, her voice trembling. "We're going to be evicted. We don't have the money to pay the rent. Dad and I don't know what to do." I remained silent, processing her words. A part of me wanted to hang up, but another part, the one that still remembered the humiliations, wanted to hear more. "Evicted," I said in a cold tone. "And what does that have to do with me? I don't live there anymore. You two figure it out." "No, wait!" she shouted, almost on the verge of tears. "We have nothing. My salary isn't enough. And Dad hasn't been able to work much. Please, Esteban, you're our only hope. If we don't pay this month, they'll throw us out on the street." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a dry laugh, loaded with all the resentment I had accumulated over the years. "Your salary isn't enough." How curious, Claudia. Because when you were spending it all on parties, clothes, and clubs, you never worried about the rent. And now, suddenly, I'm your savior. Where was that concern when you treated me like your personal bank? "Please, Esteban, this isn't the time for that," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I wasn't the best sister, but we need your help, your family. You can't just leave us like this." Before I could answer, I heard another voice in the background. It was my father, Gustavo, snatching the phone from Claudia. "Esteban, listen to me carefully," he yelled with that deep voice he used when he wanted to assert his authority. But this time, there was something different. It wasn't just anger. There was desperation. "Do you think you can just wash your hands of us and leave us on the street? You're selfish. We always gave you a roof, food, a family. And now that you're earning a fortune, you turn your back on us. That's not what a man does." I felt the rage rising in my chest, but also a strange calm. For the first time, I didn't feel intimidated. "A roof, food, a family," I said, almost spitting the words. "Let's get something straight, Dad. For years, I paid for that roof. I paid for the food. I paid for the electricity, the water, even your damn beers. And what did I get in return? Your mockery. You're made to enjoy life, Esteban, not work. Claudia is my princess. Leave her alone. And now you call me selfish? No, Dad, you're the selfish one, living off my salary while you got drunk with your friends. Claudia is the selfish one, laughing in my face while I killed myself working." "Don't make me say it, Esteban," he interrupted, but his voice no longer had the same force. "You have money, a lot of money. We saw it on that check. You could save us. Your sister wants to go to university. She wants a future. Don't you care?" I laughed again, louder this time. "University. The prestigious university you wanted me to pay for with 80% of my salary and the other 20% for your drinking binges. Do you remember that, Dad? Because I do. You told me, it's that simple. Well, now I'm telling you. Get jobs, pay your bills, survive. It's that simple." "Don't you dare talk to me like that," he roared. But he sounded more like a cornered animal than the man who used to intimidate me. "Without us, you'd be nothing. We raised you. We gave you everything." "You gave me everything," I said, my voice turning as cold as ice. "The only thing you gave me was a promise that tied me to you like a chain. Mom told me not to leave you alone, and that's why I stayed, enduring your humiliations, your laughter, your worthless Esteban. But you know what? That check you saw, that money that excites you so much, is the fruit of my sacrifice, of my sleepless nights, my overtime hours, my promotions, not yours, not Claudia's, mine. And I'm not giving you another cent." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Claudia got back on the phone, sobbing. "Esteban, please. We have no one else. If we get evicted, I don't know what we'll do. Please, I'm begging you. We're your family." "Family," I said, and I felt the words burn in my throat. "A family doesn't use you. A family doesn't laugh at you while they bleed you dry. A family doesn't make you feel worthless. You are not my family. You are parasites. And parasites sooner or later have to learn to survive on their own." "You can't do this to us," she cried. But I was no longer listening. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight on my chest lighten. It wasn't just rage I felt. It was justice. It was the satisfaction of knowing that after everything they did to me, they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. A few weeks later, my mother, Marina, called me, her voice full of reproach, as if I were the villain of the story. Esteban, I'm disappointed in you. How could you abandon your family? Your father and sister are going through a terrible time, and you, with all that money, just left them alone. They couldn't pay the rent, and the landlord had no mercy and kicked them out. It's your fault. I tried to explain to her with all the patience I had left. I told her about Gustavo's drinking, how he spent my salary on beer while I barely slept. I told her about Claudia, who mocked me while she spent her money on parties. I told her about the humiliations, the laughter, the way they made me feel invisible. But she didn't want to listen. They're your family, she said, with that tone she always used to make me feel guilty. You should be there for them no matter what they've done. Not anymore, Mom, I said, my heart heavy but resolute. I'm not going to carry them anymore. If you want to help them, you do it. But I'm done. I hung up, and since that day, I haven't spoken to her again. I don't know if she'll ever understand my side. But I don't care anymore. I cut the last tie with that toxic family. And for the first time in years, I feel free, and I have no intention of going back. After a while, I found out that Gustavo now works as a taxi driver, working long shifts under the sun to earn just enough to survive. Claudia, for her part, had to hand over her entire salary to pay the bills for a smaller house they moved into. There are no parties, no brand-name clothes, no clubs, just the reality they never wanted to face. 1 year later, my life is my own. I'm a regional manager at the company with a salary that allows me to travel and save for my own house. My apartment is filled with things that reflect who I am: books, a bicycle, photos from my travels. Freedom tastes like coffee on my balcony, like a morning without shouting or guilt. Now, as I look at the city from my window, I know I own nothing. I live for myself. The rage has turned into peace, justice, into freedom. They are facing their consequences, and I am finally free. Looking back at the night I walked out of that house with my single suitcase, I realize it wasn't just the physical distance that saved me. It was the shattering of a psychological prison I had spent my entire life building. For 27 years, I was conditioned to believe that my worth was inextricably tied to my utility. I was the golden goose, the silent beast of burden whose only purpose was to plow the fields so my father and sister could feast. The transition from that suffocating reality to the profound, quiet peace of my current life wasn't an overnight miracle. It took months of unlearning the deeply ingrained guilt that my mother, Marina, had planted in my chest. Every time my phone rang during those first few weeks, my stomach would drop, bracing for another onslaught of manipulation. But as the seasons changed, the frantic calls stopped, replaced by the deafening, beautiful silence of boundaries being enforced. Word occasionally filters back to me through old neighbors about the harsh reality check Gustavo and Claudia are currently enduring. My father, the man who proudly declared his working days were over while he drank away my youth, is now driving a taxi 14 hours a day. He is finally feeling the agonizing ache in his lower back and the exhaustion that comes from actual labor. The exact pain he happily watched me endure for a decade. Claudia, the princess who believed a prestigious university and designer clothes were her birthright, is now working double shifts at a grocery store just to keep the lights on in their cramped, dilapidated apartment. There are no more very important person club entrances or brand-name shopping sprees. The universe, in its absolute, unyielding justice, forced them to become the adults they spent their entire lives running away from. I don't feel joy at their struggle, but I feel an immense, grounding satisfaction in knowing that the parasitic cycle is permanently broken. The hardest ghost to exorcise was my mother. Her final phone call, dripping with disappointment and weaponized shame, echoed in my mind for a long time. She had abandoned us for Europe under the guise of providing a better life, but ultimately she just outsourced her parental responsibilities to a teenager. She demanded I be the man of the house, so she wouldn't have to face the wreckage she left behind. Realizing that her love was entirely conditional upon my absolute submission was the final key to my freedom. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. Today, as a regional manager, I oversee dozens of employees and manage budgets that would have made my father salivate. But my greatest achievement isn't the title or the salary, it's the sanctuary I've built. As I sit on the balcony of my own apartment, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise over the city, I know that every book on my shelf, every piece of furniture, and every stamp in my passport belongs solely to me. I chose self-preservation over self-betrayal, and in doing so, I finally claimed the one thing they tried so desperately to steal, my future. To better understand the nature of the problem, let's temporarily set aside the emotions of the main character and analyze this series of events from a broader perspective. In countless households, the idea of family duty is quietly reshaped into an expectation of silent sacrifice. where one person becomes the pillar, while others lean without ever learning to stand. What happened here was not born in a single moment of cruelty, but in years of normalized imbalance, where love was confused with obligation and responsibility was weaponized into control. The father's entitlement and the sister's dependence did not grow in isolation. They were nurtured by a system that praises endurance but rarely questions exploitation. It tells us loyalty means staying even when we are being diminished. And yet, stepping away from that cycle reveals something uncomfortable but necessary. Enabling dysfunction is not the same as preserving family. I think that's the part many people struggle to accept. I know you can probably feel the tension in this kind of decision, the guilt that creeps in when you choose yourself after years of choosing others. You're told that walking away is selfish, that drawing a line is betrayal. But look closer, was it really a family being protected or a pattern being protected? Because there is a quiet courage in saying enough, in refusing to finance someone else's irresponsibility with your own well-being. There is strength in understanding that boundaries are not walls built out of hatred, but lines drawn out of self-respect. I see this story less as an act of abandonment and more as a correction, a rebalancing. When one person carries everything, the system becomes dependent on their silence. The moment they stop, everything collapses. But that collapse is not destruction, it is exposure. It forces everyone involved to confront reality, to take responsibility, to grow in ways they were previously avoiding. And that process is rarely comfortable. It looks harsh from the outside, even cruel to those who benefited from the imbalance. But sometimes discomfort is the only doorway to change. You might wonder whether things could have been handled differently, whether there was a softer path, a compromise that didn't end in separation. But the truth is, not all dynamics can be negotiated when respect is absent. Sometimes, distance becomes the only language left that others are willing to understand. And even then, the hardest part is not leaving. It's staying gone, resisting the pull of guilt disguised as duty. So when you think about this story, don't just see the conflict, see the pattern. See how easily care can turn into control, how quickly sacrifice can become expectation, and how quietly a person can lose themselves trying to keep others afloat. If you were in that position, torn between honoring your family's needs and protecting your own dignity, at what point would you decide that staying is no longer loyalty but self-betrayal?